So this is, actually it's a new group, and I just set in the ESG, responsible investing. So there's some pieces of it that we're going to tag on today in what I'm going to cover. But this is real estate specific. So my name is Kristinia Heuberger. I am the head of U.S. Asset Management for LaSalle Investment Management. LaSalle is just to put it in context for you, LaSalle is a global real estate focused private equity firm. We're about 750 people, about $68 billion of assets under management in 17 different countries. We're actually wholly owned by JLL. Most people recognize that name even more, so in the financial arena, and which is a very large real estate services public company. One of the other names, JLL Income Property Trust, I wanted to mention today. Most of you, if you're on the financial side for investing, have heard that, and that's our real estate daily NAV REIT. Okay? So one of the things, I've actually been in the real estate industry for not quite 25 years now. And I've been in different functions and roles within real estate, but most of the time on the asset management side. And I wanted to explain that because it puts a little context on what I cover or what I talk about from the real estate perspective. The main topics that I told Theo I would talk about today is the commercial real estate tech awakening, and I can explain to you what I mean by that, and then ESG for real estate in today's environment. Before I get there, I wasn't quite sure on how many people were very versed in real estate, how large the industry is, the different parameters of a commercial real estate and investing. So I thought I would ask. I have a couple of slides depending on what people were interested in hearing. So how many people are familiar, Holly, you don't count, with commercial real estate and commercial real estate investing?
No.
A little bit? Okay. So I'll go through these then quickly just to give a feel. So to put the commercial real estate in context, it's the third largest asset class of $16 trillion in the U.S., of about $16 trillion. And I took this from the Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. There are three main commercial strategies that private investment have from core, value add, and opportunistic. Just real briefly, if you can look on this is the risk and expected return spectrum here. You know, down the corner you have core assets. These are usually well-maintained assets, stabilized occupancy, and in the right locations of a particular market, usually lower leverage. Most of the return that you're going to get from this is income-based, right? It's already a cash flowing real estate. You get into value add. Now there starts to be there's a value play. There's work that the asset management's going to be doing on creating value at that property. Sometimes it's a really small amount and sometimes it's larger. This could be maybe they're lower occupied, have some deferred maintenance, or maybe not have the current feel that properties today in that market, such as a retail center, et cetera, might have. So there's some repositioning that might need to be done. Those are usually more medium leveraged, and the returns come from both appreciation and from the income side. Then you head on up the spectrum to opportunistic. These are typically ground up developments, but sometimes they can also be really heavy renovation and reposition play. Sometimes they're totally converting that property into something different than it exists today because it was obsolete, like we were talking about some of those places earlier, Susan, and obsolete today, it needs to be repositioned. Those typically have very little occupancy, maybe no cash flow at the beginning, are higher leveraged, and the returns are coming predominantly from that reposition and the appreciation, okay? In the types of properties, there's many different types of commercial real estate properties, but these are the four main food groups that everybody talks about. It has a majority of what in the indexes of real estate of what people invest in. And that's office, retail, industrial, multifamily. I'm assuming, all of you guys in your daily life, are exposed to those, so you understand what those properties are. But that's, when we talk about, when you look at any of the indexes, they have, 80-some% of those. Okay? Does that kind of get familiar enough to kind of set the stage there a little bit for commercial real estate?
Where does hotel fall?
Hotel is a specialty niche. Now, I will tell you, 20 years ago, hotel was a total niche property, and we have several of those, whether, you've got self-storage, truck terminals, manufactured housing, there's all kinds, but hotels started to get into a little bit more mainstream. And anytime you start to see institutional investors, bigger players, own and invest in them, it's become more standard. It still has a smaller percentage within the index, so it's still not considered the 4 main food groups, but it's after that. Now, office, just to make a point, because this is something actually we focus a lot on, medical office is also medical office in there. Even though it's a little bit of a specialty within that, medical office is included in that office investment, and that has actually become much more institutional today as well. Okay. So, asset management, particularly for those of you who are investing or financial advisors, this terminology means a lot of different things because every industry is very different. Would it help if I explained this quickly of when I say, and Holly in the room here is at asset management as well, and real estate asset management, what that actually means? I find that is a little helpful. So, in answer to the question, who is asset management when it comes to commercial real estate, we actually have the portfolio management is the terminology that we use. And they are really deciding the portfolio makeup, what assets should be put in that portfolio, the diversification of those, what markets they want to invest in. And there could be lots of reasons and objectives depending on if it's a fund or if it's a particular client investment. Asset managers, the best way to explain it, I heard somebody say this one, I'm like, that's exactly what it is an asset manager is like the CEO, CFO, and COO of a particular property. So you are responsible for setting the strategy, running the property, and hiring all the people that run the day-to-day operations. And you are working with portfolio management based on their objectives in their portfolio on how to operate that property, because it does matter. There's different things that we do in asset management depending on the objective of that particular portfolio. We actually hire property teams, the main ones being our property management and leasing folks, but we have a lot of people that work the day-to-day, and the asset managers are in charge of all of those folks. Does that help a little bit? And I also get the question, what does asset management actually do from that perspective? So to answer that, I have this little picture up here that has kind of 4 main topics. The biggest one, most people would think about it, is revenue management. So for revenue management, this would be anything that you can think of from, leasing, so that's marketing and strategies around leasing, getting the property occupied and having cash flow in that property. But this also can be the tenant mix or the tenant quality. So tenant management also plays in there, the role of it. So you don't have, you usually don't want all the tenants rolling at the same time or residents rolling at the same time. So you need to manage that. All of that goes in revenue management as well. This also includes things where you try to do some revenue enhancement. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Cost control is another big bucket that we focus on. This is anything from, bulk purchasing that we do in regions, leveraging our platform to do this. We rebid some of the major contracts every year. Most municipalities, we're always doing appeals for taxes to ensure that we have the right tax levels. And then there's all kinds of programs and operations, particularly on the sustainability side, that we do to reduce operating expenses. In conjunction actually with both of those, on the revenue management and cost control, there's smart capital investment. And an asset manager is focused on this all the time. What is the right dollars spent? And they're looking maybe for enhancement projects because they're trying to get, they've got to keep up with a newer product on and continue. You guys seen those, whether it's an office building or retail center, and they're, now, changing it, putting new shops in, all new facade, et cetera. You've got to do it to keep up with what's going on in that market. So sometimes there's enhancement projects there, and you're trying to drive additional occupancy or revenues, so top line. There could be asset preservation work. If you, just like in your cars and your homes, if you let things deteriorate, they cost you more money. So you do have to keep your maintenance programs on and sometimes do capital investments to continue to reduce those costs. And then we have sustainability projects that we do that create operational efficiencies. And last but not least, that nobody wants to talk about is risk mitigation. But this is really important because this is the stuff that you don't want to care about till you actually have to care about it. And we have an insurance platform, we have standard forms and contracts to making sure you have all the protections, indemnity, securities, and people at the properties are doing what they should be doing. And we have protocols and emergency procedures. And unfortunately, those have had to be tested a lot in the past few years. But that's, we have best practices, we have our platforms have best practices, and then these are things that you have to do for risk mitigation. Okay? So hopefully that's setting the stage a little bit for real estate and kind of what we do in asset management for real estate. So now on to technology. So Theo started in on technology and all that was going on. And it's a little bit overwhelming, right, on a daily basis. But we use technology all the time in our personal lives. Whether it be, products we have in our home, whether it be the smartphone that we carry around with us everywhere, iPads, et cetera. That has become common. And in a lot of industries, technology and innovation has been something they have had in their industry for quite some time. This is not the case for real estate. I have to tell you, and until more recently, until now, this real estate actually hasn't had a lot of investment in the technology space. And that's not just the people in real estate investing in technology. You really need startups and other companies offering services or offering options. And heretofore, it had actually been pretty expensive to try to do that because those investment wasn't coming into that space. And I have a market colleague that calls it the awakening, and I feel like that's a really good descriptor of what's actually been happening. And to think about real estate technology, I have to first talk to you about the funding of that and why this is changing. And I'm going to use the word prop tech. Have you guys, anybody heard the word prop tech before? Yeah. Prop tech is property level technology, but it actually is now spread into anything that's kind of new real estate related technology. Everybody likes to kind of like fintech, et cetera. People like to have little, catchphrases in prop tech. So if you hear prop tech, that's what they're talking about. And as you can see on this, historically, the VC investment in this innovation was minuscule. However, in the past 5 years, this has ramped up dramatically, where you can see in last year almost 5 times it was just a few years ago, which has been great. What that has done is that additional investment by the VCs has created an explosion of prop tech companies. If I showed you a picture, there's one I have, and I just thought you can't even see the logos on the screen, so it would not be helpful for you guys. But it's thousands that are coming out on a rapid fire basis. Now, not all these are going to survive, but the fact that innovation is happening and allowing those of us working in real estate and investing in real estate opportunities to leverage those tools to do different things in both how we invest and how we operate the properties. It's for somebody who's been in the industry for a long time, it's thrilling, exciting, and overwhelming all at the same time. So, to get your arms around and figure out what you need to do. So what I wanted to share with you today was some examples of this. Because this is newer, I thought it would be fun to be able to show you what I'm talking about, okay? So, as I said, technology is now touching a lot of different areas, and I put some examples here and how that's going on. So in the construction space, you would think, innovation. This actually has had 2.8 billion of the 21 that I showed you before, and you're going to see a wide range of numbers of these kind of investments. I will share, be transparent with you about that. But the construction has had a significant amount in the past 5 years. Some of the ones that it's gone into is like modular construction. I don't know if you guys have seen this or know what this is. They're literally building multifamily units off-site, put it together, and then they take it to the site and they stick it in. It is the coolest thing when you see one of these. And if you just think about it, doing this, you don't have weather issues, there's more control on it. Actually, the timing, it's up to 50% of the time saves it from scheduling and being able to put things in. So there's all kinds of positives in being able to predict that. They also project like a 20, from 5 to 20% cost savings. Now, actuality in the industry, what has experienced to date, hasn't quite been at the higher level, but that's because some of the drawbacks is it has to be repetitious. You can only use stuff on this for, you're seeing in some of the hotel rooms, some multifamily, but a lot of it's more affordable housing or student housing, where you have similar exact units, not a lot of flexibility, and you have to have multiple projects. Setting it up for one project is not going to get you that cost savings. You have to be somebody who's developing that for more. So there's going to be a lot more to come on this. This is a little bit newer. There's about 250 manufacturers of these type, and sometimes it's not the whole unit. Sometimes it's pieces, and they put them in there. But they do expect this. I think the numbers are. Let me check the billions that are in the space today. 111 billion global market for modular construction, growing about 6.5% over the next few years. However, that still is only going to put it about 3% of construction in North America. So just to put that a little bit of context. Even smaller than that, I have to mention, I don't have a picture of it, is 3D printing. So, and I mentioned it because Theo mentioned 3D printing in her earlier. We are starting to see that very new, just in the past year, not on a big commercial yet. It's being tested particularly for affordable housing. There's been a couple of test cases going on. I think the first house that was built in France using 3D printer is now inhabited, but that's the only one. If you, I do have a video I can send to you guys. It's extremely interesting and cool to watch this and what that can become, of actually 3D printing concrete or steel into. And this, we talk a lot about affordable housing and how that's going to happen across the nation, and some of that divergence that's going on. That is where down the road I think can be really beneficial, okay? Drones. Everybody hears all the bads about drones, right? Well, there's some really good things. I got 2 examples for you today on drones for real estate. And this one is in the construction industry. A lot of developers and construction companies are using drones for surveying of the properties or getting status updates on progress that's going on. That is both real-time and effective, but it can also identify problems before you get too far when they're happening. This picture here is a thermo imaging. And when you take a look at that, they could actually use that to see if there's structural issues once they're getting to completions of that. We've used it personally in situations where it was we were looking at a facade, we had a top facade issue, very dangerous to be up there for people, particularly the way this property was. We were able to work with a company, use drone to do an inspection of that, and it's so much better than getting a camera, and it was a lot less dangerous for someone to get up and do that. So you hire a drone to take a look at that, and it allows us to have a view of it. There's a lot of companies that provide the drone construction or the monitoring or view of that. A lot of people think of drones of dropping Amazon packages right down the road or whatever it is, or spying on people as celebrities. There's a lot of great uses of that technology today. And then lastly, on the construction tracking tools. This was such a manual process before, everything from bidding to understanding where it was scheduling in the project. There's all kinds of tools in there from that the developers and construction workers can use in their projects to ones at asset management. This is an asset management tool we have there where I can see any project that we going on, the stage it is it behind or on time, on the capital planning, is it over budget, under budget, and what's the projected of this. That's amazing. We used to manually do all that before, and these are all new products that have come out in the past year to 2 years. Okay? Data analytics. So I think it was Theo was saying about, you're followed everywhere. This is where new data sources and analytics have significantly increased in the space. We're starting to leverage that in how we look at and analyze a property. One of the biggest is mobile data, right? And related to commercial real estate, this type of data allows us to do a couple of things. One, it can truly define the area. In real estate, you have to, what is your market area? This is example here. This is actually Santa Jose Marketplace, if you guys are familiar with that. It's a local. And we look at, where are they drawing in customers from, for those tenants. And if you have like this heat map, this geofencing heat map on the right-hand side, tells you where people are spending their time while they're at the property. That helps you a lot in understanding the layout. Maybe you're using it as you're doing acquisitions and you're trying to first understand the dynamics of that property, or as an asset manager and looking at it today, what's the mix of your tenant mix? In retail properties, the tenant mix is critically important. I don't know if you guys pay attention to that when you actually go shopping at the centers, but it matters of who's sitting next to each other and how they go. You can see the hot ones here: Target, Marshalls, Trader Joe's. That's where you see those big clusters of red there. And so you can see, what your anchors are by looking at that. Okay? So this is a lot of fun that's going on. I will tell you, this also has a lot of companies like ourselves pay attention to the privacy and social element of this. This microdata, this is on a picture, but if I actually had it up and you drill down into it, our research team, it's blurred. I can't get to it. I can't get to an individual person's home. So this microdata where it says where you guys are going to, where everybody's going to that went to that center, and so you can see the graphic, you can't see it. So companies have to take precautions like that in their security and make sure that the data they get, they can use for, it's anonymized, right? They can use it for investment purposes, but they actually can't use it for, drill down to any particular person. Okay? Business management, I've got a couple on here. This is huge in our life for asset management and portfolio management. The prop tech has really grown tremendously over the past year or two. And the reason this is important, it used to be dominated by a couple of players. It was basically accounting, Yardi, MRI, sort of big counting systems and valuations. Now there's all kinds of tools to be able to handle, manage, optimize, to making decision, communications among the team. Everybody can see the same thing at one time. That is big for the industry. And this is a major step for us in some capabilities, and even some of it automating, workflows, whether it be lease approvals, and so that way you save a lot of time. You also have the audit trail of it. So there's all kinds of benefits to having this technology. I show a couple examples here of the leasing, revenue management, business intelligence, and transactions, our front-end acquisition deal pipeline. Okay. Marketing. No surprise, marketing and technology has been used in a lot of different industries. I'd like to say in real estate, we just didn't take advantage of that until more recently. We were still just emailing, having photos, and you go hunt for a really good photo of a property, but that's not how us as consumers, whether we're renting an apartment or we're going to a retail center or we're in an office building, how we use the bot, that's not how we experience it. And so they've started to use more, and I've got a couple examples here for you on technology and marketing. This is another example of the drone videos and how drone videos, we're using them. So this is actually a video that we put together. It's a drone video that our marketing team is able to overlay infographics. And this is something our leasing brokers use. When they get a call, they have a tour, they can send this out as a follow-up. Remember us, it's energetic, It's talking about all the where are the access points, who are the other people that are there, how many people are in the area. It's a huge marketing benefit for us to use things like this as we're doing. And it's actually not as common as it used to be. You guys don't have to go through the whole video, but I just want to show you an example of this. I get very excited about some of these.
Where is this? What city?
That one was in the suburbs of Chicago. It's out in Wheaton, if you're familiar with Chicago. Yeah. Another one is a 3D experience. Everybody's heard virtual reality, but we actually use that in the real estate space as well. And these type of tools, I will tell you, sometimes when people tour real estate, tenants or residents, they've seen 15 other properties that day. For multifamily, a lot of times they want to look online first and tour it before they go out. Sometimes industrial that's further out as well. These tools allow us, allow a user to be able to go in, and it's a 360 view, move around themselves and see the space. We use this, like I said, maybe as a pre-tour, but it's also sending out follow-up so they remember, oh yeah, that one, right? That was the space I saw that had this in it, and this is what I look like. They sent it to their CEO, CFO, and now we have people that didn't even go on the tour that actually, got to see a tour. Whoops. It's really hard I had to do a video of this because if I went into it live, you can play around it yourself, but this is this shows a user kind of doing that, and you just move around in it all you want, right? A lot of times we have like the lobby, we have different locations, and they can go around and see, or a particular, maybe a unit in a residential unit, you can see what that looked like, okay? Tenant experience and resident experience. There hasn't been a lot of money flowing to this yet, but it is ramping up very fast. It's one of the hottest spots for technology and real estate. And what this means is, I think I put on there 10X and ResX, but this is technology-enabled services to change the experience of a tenant or resident in your properties. And this is what people are expecting today. Given that the mobile phone, I think the stat is like the most important device for consumers because we all have them, we all carry them around with it's a critical access point for us in engaging our tenants or residents at the property. So you'll see us use that, and some of the new startups that have come out and the technology is using those in apps. I've got an example both of the office and multifamily here. To get building engagement, activities that are going to the building, scheduling for, the class, in the fitness center, or some of it like the concierge. The example I have here is Hello Alfred is one of the startups there. You can, have your dog walked. You can have somebody drop off flowers in your apartment or do grocery shopping, etc. All of this is done as services for your tenants or residents. One of the other one that probably a lot of you guys have heard about is space as a service. People have heard of WeWork, right, in the industry, probably not so good recently. Heard about it in the industry. Not a surprise to those of us actually in the industry. But space as a service, people, tenants do need flexibility. There was obviously a demand in the market. It wasn't just about the kombucha, on tap or whatever. What people don't realize is there's actually a lot of technology spent, a lot of technology people that a company like WeWork put in place, and that's why they're kind of grouped into this real estate technology. And that's because they call them beacons, but you can call them sensors, that as you go through a space, it is tracking you. And that part of that is that user experience. It's trying to, if you go into a conference room, it tells you, well, that conference room's already booked, but this one over here is open, so go over there. And so there's your different preferences, right, that you have. And there was a lot of money spent by those companies. WeWork's the big one, most people know. They actually are not the biggest. For you guys, there is another company, Regis, who's been around for a lot longer since I've been in real estate space, and they are combined bigger than WeWork and all of its competitors together. So, but people just don't hear about as much in them because it's not as cool and sexy as WeWork is, or get as much press as most recently. And then lastly, building operations. New technology. I can have a laundry list of how this is changing operations at the property and what we're doing, both the utilizing, flexibility. I've got a couple examples here. Sensors, no surprise, right? We're putting sensors on a lot of different things. This is not new. I mean, in elevators and some of the building systems, you had these before, but not to the level it is today. But now they can put sensors on a lot of other operations at the property. The biggest one being sustainability. A lot of water, energy, and waste. Trying to monitor that, because you got to measure it to be able to figure out how to change it, right? And so we're seeing a lot of startups come out that are sensor related. We also are seeing smart space. How many of you guys have some kind of smart home, whether it's a plug, a thermostat? You now have an Echo Dot in your bag. We wanted to make sure either we feed the enthusiasm or we get you started. But all of those are smart home. It's the same in a residential or office. Some of them are different. In a resi, it's actually these are products that we're using there, and we contract with a group that can do it through one app. But you have your security, you have your lighting, you have your thermostat settings, you have your communications, all of those in the smart space. A lot of money has come in new startups here. And then lastly, we're starting to see, actually in both of these, but other ones are unique, revenue enhancements for properties. The example I show here is actually electric cars that they have at office buildings or multifamily that are amenity for the residents, but a lot of those companies also provide, there's a revenue sharing to the company or the landlord who's showing that. Okay? Technology. Before I switch to a totally different topic on ESG, because I told Theo I would cover both. Anybody, any questions on the technology, real estate technology? Are you excited as I am about it? As you can tell, it's been a long time coming. It's needed to come for a long time.
Why did it take so long? It's such a huge industry.
It is a really large industry. I've asked a couple of the VCs this question because the VCs are just stepping over themselves to put money into this space today. I haven't got a great answer because it is such a big space and now a lot of investment in there. The only thing I can think of is, having been in the industry for a long time, real estate can tend to be a little old school. It has the mentality, it's a very relationship business. There's a location. You always hear about where real estate is. There's a lot of data and factors that we look at in evaluating property, and people have expert knowledge on that. And I think that investing in the technologies I mentioned today it was too costly for you to do it on yourself. To hire people to do custom built of those things, it would be astronomical. You'd never get the return for that. So you needed VC investment. You needed startup companies and innovation to happen. That really changes the cost dynamics there. And you can leverage those technologies that I was just mentioning in a property at a reasonable price and drive a good return at your property. I have not gotten a great answer of why it took so long for them to, but whether the VCs are awakening and now the real estate's going, oh, this is great if we have this stuff, and they're awakening, but regardless, everybody's awakening that this was needed in this space, and a lot of it's going on. Okay, so I'm gonna switch over to ESG. And my comments today are just talking a little bit more about kind of where I think we are today in that evolution. Speaking more to the environmental side than the social and governance side, and that's just because we play in the real estate space, which obviously environmental is really heavy from that. To me, we have a global at LaSalle, a global head of sustainability, and it was a choice that we made a few years ago to put that position in place. We had great governance and policy across JLL and LaSalle, but you really need to have people focused and activated on that. I'll explain a little bit more going on. But what I said to him when we were doing hiring, I'm like, we need to do some PR for sustainability, because it had over time, when it got started a decade or so ago, been more in real estate space. we have to check the box of doing it. And there was a little bit of, it was reporting or parameters there versus really engaging in it is like, why are you doing it? How can it be good for the building and how we can make money from it, right? From that perspective, why is it a good investment? And that has changed. And so some of the focus on it has changed. And some of it comes also too with the tenants and residents that are trying to be in those properties. And I'll talk about that. Since those of you who were not in the ESG responsible investing, she was talking specifically about this, but a few years back, the UN developed this set of global goals called Sustainable Development Goals. And this is really a blueprint, global blueprint to achieve a better tomorrow for all of us, right, and in future. This is supposed to address a lot of the challenges they're facing, everything from, poverty to environmental to prosperity, peace, justice, the works. With the agenda of having this by 2030. So pretty aggressive to do that. And to do that, they actually need everyone and stakeholders across the business to translate that and implement those goals and how it works into their industry or their business. And actually JLL, 2 years in 2017, they actually took a detailed exercise to look at these and decide how do these they did a materiality assessment. What is the most material to our business and the ones that we can have the biggest, upstream and downstream impact to that. And you can see we've got a couple of them here, and those help us prioritize what we're trying to tackle and to do. Two of the things that I think I wanted to share with you on the benchmarks today. Some people were asking in responsible investing in the last session, how do we know? Right? And there's rating agencies, Moody's, et cetera, that do these, but how do you actually really know? And unfortunately, it does take a lot of research because every industry is a little bit different. And what I really like that has come out in the past few years for real estate is that people are familiar with LEED or energy certifications, right, at the property level. But now we're starting to get into ones that are actually at a bigger level, and the visibility of that and investors are asking about that helps the industry as a whole move forward on ESG goals. So GRESB is one of these, and this one it's a benchmark that is called Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, and this is a fund level rating. So this is ratings that are given to different funds that you might be looking at. It has over, $4.5 trillion in value in 2019 got submitted in this to be scored. It's a star and numerical rating that goes through assessment from all the way from a company policy and setting, how the CEOs, what they're talking about in their investment committees, down to what they're activating, measuring, and doing at the properties. So it's a pretty holistic view. The really fantastic, not for us actually in the industry and submitting to these, but what for those investing and looking for a measurement, this benchmark moves. It's trying to focus on incremental improvement. And so you look at like how many points did you change this year and how do you go up? But it's actually a moving benchmark. And what I mean by that is just because you're 3-star today and you got 70 points doesn't mean you're going to be a 3-star next year. Because you're 75 points, maybe you went up to 80 points next year because you did some things, but everybody else did too. So now it's a 2-star. So it's competitive. It's making everybody continue to step up. You can't just like, oh, okay, I'm done, check the box, I've done with my ESG goals. It's continuing to move the bar based on, and it's a global benchmark. So it's one, if you're looking at, I would encourage you guys to take a look at. And I have to put a plug in for JLL IPT. It was actually the first daily NAV REIT that got listed with a GRESB rating. So last year. So our daily NAV REIT that we have was the first one that got listed. So you submit to GRESB and get a rating of that $4.5 trillion. They have a lot of funds around globally. We were the first ones to be in there that got rated, and we were pretty pleased and excited about that.
Who's the governing board of that?
That's a great question that I'm not going to be able to answer. I can get back to you. My head of sustainability would have that answer, but I'm sure he told me at some point in time, and The last one I wanted to mention, she had mentioned the PRI. This is not just real estate. This is across all asset class. Responsible investing, they annually come in and assess how you are, all the signatories in your ESG factors, and give you scorecards, like A, B, C, A plus, and obviously the higher the better, kind of the typical. And strategy and governance module is a big one that we focus on here, and with an A plus rating, so we get excited about that. But I wanted to share this because some of the questions in the last one was, what do we pay attention to if we want to do responsible investing, or our clients want to do responsible investing? You kind of actually have to look in the particular industry and what those industry benchmarks are. And I would tell you that a lot of them are probably newer as this over the past couple of years. I'm not going to go through this because time check.
You have 5 minutes.
Okay, so I'm not going to go through this demand drivers here of investment strategy because I'm going to show you kind of the top concerns today. But this is a white paper I'm happy to send out. We put out a couple of years ago, our research team, about the secular demand drivers of long-term investment in real estate and the things you need to pay attention to. And that's demographics and technology and urbanization. And 2 years ago, we actually added in the E factor, the environmental change factor here, that we think in long term has an impact and something you should be paying attention to for investment. I didn't bring you a copy. I digitally sent it out. It's a 38-page white paper. So I thought, the last thing you guys want was stick that in. I'm not sure you want that, but happy to send it to anybody. I'll send it out. It's actually a really good read if you're interested in how this and any of these, because the S&G, the social and governance, is in our demographics and urbanization as well, how that's going to play out, or we think it's going to play out in real estate investing in the long term. It's good insight. So happy to share that with you. Here's a quick number I'm going to throw out at you. Our estimation based on that paper is a 12 to 4. This is purely theoretical. Because it's really hard to actually prove out because there's so many other factors going on. But there's a 12-14% green premium on buildings. And this is really coming from our argument around, the value created drivers. And you can see this in the white paper from increased occupancy, rental premiums, lower expenses, and decreased regulatory compliance or functional obsolescence. And this is all around buildings that have focused on green and sustainability. This off to the right-hand side is actually an occupier study, which Morgan Stanley was involved in, but it was a national occupier study that they did where it was, how do they viewing it? And you can see the stats on are pretty high. 74% of it thought it would add value for them and retaining. A lot of it was around, retaining talent, attracting and retaining talent. But almost half of them said they would expect a rental premium on it, and they would avoid sites that had bad sustainability. So that's something to focus on. I'm not going to go into this because we got 5 minutes in the last page. The critical part to take away this is you have to activate ESG. This has to be in what you do today. It can't be, and this is what I was talking about, a policy that you have and how you feel about it. You should have those. You should do disclosures. You should care about the companies you're investing in. But they have to take it to the asset level. And as I mentioned, when I hired a global sustainability leader a couple of years ago, that was the biggest piece when I talked to him about, I'm like, you have to walk the property, talk with our engineers, talk with the asset managers, talk with tenants out there and what we're trying to do for that property and engage those initiatives. Sometimes it's energy procurement, and sometimes it's just doing LED. Sometimes it's working with tenants on just their operations or maybe their tenant build out. And as you can see here, it's across the board. We start working on it in due diligence and acquisitions, and in evaluating what those credentials are and maybe what opportunities you have to increase those, to how Holly and I manage the assets in our operations there. We actually have green lease language in our leases. What that is predominantly doing is trying to get it so you can measure. One of the biggest challenges landlords have is measuring the usage, the energy usage, the water usage, and the waste and being able to have that information that allows us to do different things in programs and maybe capital expense in the building. And so you have to activate this on all levels to actually make it work, okay? And I'm happy to send all this to everybody. I've got a couple examples that we can go through, but I want to go to, for our last couple minutes, the biggest sustainability topics that we see today. I asked our global head of sustainability, every time you go somewhere, what are people talking about today, current? No surprise, right? Climate change and risk. This is something that the world is focused on after the Paris Agreement, though I think we've recently pulled out of that, focusing on climate change. And this is, and I didn't realize that there are actually two risks they're talking about is physical and transition. Do you guys know what those both are? So I'm going to, just real quick, I have a thing. It's kind of hard to read on here, but I want to just put in case physical risks on the right side. This is what you guys think, right? Something gets flooded, something burns, like there's a hurricane, right? And you have physical damage to the property. Either that could be, acute because the hurricane came through, or because the heat and sun all the time, you have wear and tear on a building more than normal. The transition, this is everything else, and this is the shift that's going on as we try to become a lower carbon globe across the globe, whether that be how markets are reacting to it, reputation, policy setting. So those are risks that as a real estate investor you have to pay attention to as well. So setting that, there is a lot, I will tell you in the real estate, a lot of discussion going around this. Some of the strategies around and most of the focus is trying to understand how to actually map this. Modeling, there's, in the technology arena I just mentioned, there's prop tech companies already trying to figure out how do you model these and do forward-looking models with all these different factors of what would be at risk and that level of risk. That is still happening today. Nobody has that figured out. And then starting down at, well, what do you do about that? How do you evaluate your portfolio, the decisions you make for that, and how do you mitigate that and work with sometimes local authorities to mitigate that? So that is all a very hot topic. Actually, at our company, this is something, there's a United Nations Environmental Program Finance Initiative pilot that has just gotten started that companies have elected to be. There's a group of companies of pension funds, insurers, and some asset managers. And this is all aimed around trying to develop a methodology to assess this client risk and do the analysis. And this is something that's going on right now. And we've actually at our company too have just kicked off a climate risk committee that our risk management, our global sustainability committee, and our research team are all a part of. And again, trying to figure out how do we look at that across our portfolio and what we, incorporating that in what we do, just like the ESG, both in our due diligence and our asset management and operations. Related to that is the net zero carbon. And for those of you not familiar with this, the exact definition of this is a net zero carbon building is a building that's highly energy efficient and fully powered from on-site or off-site renewable energy. And this is something that the real estate companies are increasingly focused on, given our carbon footprint. Real estate carbon footprint is about 40% globally. And so the industry is trying to adopt this definition and figure out how they get to that. I think it's like by 2050, everybody be at a net carbon zero. And some of the, actually our office in the UK, but the UK seems to be kind of the leader a little bit in how this is going. They have a group called the BBP, so it's a Better Buildings Partnership Climate Change Commitment. And this is a group of signatories that got together in the UK, and part of signing that, they have a commitment to both saying by next year what their net zero carbon pathway is, and then disclosing of that, the progress and status of it, and then I think 2 years after next year, also talking about how to do the mitigation and having strategies around mitigation and resilience. So this is what the intent of this group is in doing this, and so publicly, is to really kind of a call to action to others, right? That they're trying to get others in the industry and across the globe to actually step up and think about this as well. So all of this is really new. A lot of it just this year and coming out next year. But I wanted to make sure to share that with you because you're going to see and hear a lot more about it from the real estate space. And then health and wellness. This is actually where I think ESG, the wellness topic has come up a lot. And where historically tenants and in the kind of war on talent, people are looking for space and they're evaluating sustainability. This is now a part of sustainability. And people want, it's a healthy building, whether it's air quality or there's a bike room or it's close to fitness facilities or they have it, there's stairs that people can walk. It's all about kind of health and wellness, which has come in. This is a big in our society. And for the younger folks, the millennials and the group behind it, what is that, Gen Z? Behind them, this is a really critical piece of what they think about and talk about today. And so that's becoming something that we get questions on. We probably get more questions on health and wellness sometimes than we do the environmental side of things, that they go hand in hand. And so we capture it all in sustainability ourselves. There's actually certifications that have started, Well and Fitwell are a couple of certifications you might hear of if you're looking into this, around these that are assessing all of those type of things in a building. But this is one of the current topics as well that we're spending a lot of time on. Questions on ESG that I know I've like a lot of information really quick.
Are there tax structures and incentives in place to encourage people to invest in ESG in real estate?
Yes. One of the things, actually, our global sustainability, not as much as there should be, but our global sustainability leader does, as part of our, like when we do our due diligence acquisition, we actually have information he's put together of, this municipality, because a lot of it is local, is offering this like rebate for here if you invest, and we look in programs. So we've been working with, trying to figure out a way to pilot solar and some of the paybacks you get on those, but you have to dig for them and know them to get some of the incentives. It's not broader based.
What about opportunity zones?
Yes. But opportunity zones are they're more of the S&G, right? They're trying to give there. There is, and that's been, fairly new, right? It introduced last year, a lot of investment going on in opportunities, especially for the multifamily side. And I think, we deal with, a lot of new construction in areas having affordable pieces and non-affordable pieces for their investment. So there's some incentive to that in being actually able to build there, or some tax incentive structures from that. But purely on environmental, no.
Yeah. What's the cost estimate for retrofits?
Of
to make
anything.
These buildings, all the buildings. I mean, if you listen to AOC, they're supposed to be all neutral, right?
Yeah, which is going to take some. It kind of depends. So you might even have an older building that has newer building systems. We have in the space for quite some time. If we're doing a chiller update, which has to happen, we're going to look, instead of replace like kind, we're going to put in the one, maybe it's a little bit more expensive, we're going to put in the one that is much more energy efficient. And that's been happening over time. So you might have a building, one of the examples I have, and there is a 1910 office building in Portland that, part of its bad sustainability credentials just wasn't run appropriately. Sometimes your processes, your engineering team isn't running the new equipment that you put in there the right way to have that. You're not training educating your tenants on what they should be doing. Retrofitting stuff is, an LED lights, which you'd be amazed on how much expense, right? How that you can get back on those. And we've been working on those with across the board. But some of the bigger retrofits, you get a cost savings from it, but the payback can be longer. In industrial and retail, one of the challenges we face, you don't control the usually the usage and the payment of the utilities, right? You don't have as much common area as you do in like a multifamily or definitely an office building. That becomes harder. So part of it is, working in partnership with your tenants on getting and understanding what those are and helping them with their ESG goals and what they're trying to do. And some of the times we've actually paid for a lot of their leases in the retail space. If you make any of those upgrades, you can't charge them for that, but they get the OpEx benefit of it, right? So it saves them. A lot of them, though, care about this, and you can talk with them today. We've worked with, like H-E-B is a big grocer in the South, on a lot of their stores. We modify the lease. We do these big improvements to add sustainability to their locations, and they get the OpEx benefit, and we get the benefit because they're paying some on the reimbursement as well. So there's a definite win-win for tenants and landlords to work together on that, but you have to, because it's not the market standard on those leases don't lend itself well to that.